Hello and welcome to Move Conversations. This is your host, Venkat. In this episode, I talked to Sabyasachi Mishra. He's a fellow IITian, fellow IIFTian, and a veteran minerals and metals trader and a coal trader. He was a former head of business development at Tata International in Singapore and now business head at JSW International Tradecorp, also in Singapore. He's 27 years of overall experience, and out of which 17 years in commodity trading, and has worked both in the private sector as the leading private sector companies that I mentioned, and also in public sector corporations like MMTC. He's a regular speaker at most of the industry conferences. My co-producer Mrigank and I know Sabi for many years. Sabi, welcome to Move Conversation Trade Stuff.
Thank you, Venkat. Thank you for this opportunity. And I must commend both you and Mrigank for this great initiative. I think it's a great sharing platform for the industry knowledge. And you have covered quite a lot of industries in the last few months. And I'm sure it's going to spread the knowledge to the right audience. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Thank you for those nice words. Sabi, when did you get started with coal trading? Did you start out as a Koile ka dalal, a coal trader, or as a buyer of coal for an end user?
When I left IFT to start my career post my MBA, I started out as a denim guru. We joined Urban Mills, and I was the product head for denim, trying to make a career in fashion. And slowly things moved on and moved to Indonesia in the polymer industry. And there 4 years in Indonesia, and then I moved to Singapore in 2003. And in Singapore, because of the vibrancy on the commodity trading sector, I made a very conscious shift to commodities. And in the commodity basket, if you look at Singapore's commodity basket, coal has its prominence because of the Singapore's proximity to the producing countries as well as consuming countries. It's a very natural choice. So initially, few years I was working with smaller enterprises, more on an entrepreneurial streak, you can say, and supplying coal to that time to India quite a bit from China. Interestingly, China was exporting coking coal those days, and so we used to do coking coal from China, then energy coal from Indonesia, and combine the vessels and move it to India.
Right.
And then I moved to MMTC Singapore as their vice president trading, which was basically heading the trade portfolio. And there I did not just coal, but various other commodities during that stint. And as you mentioned correctly, being a government company, it exposed me to also the tender side of the business, how it works. And so it was a very good journey with MMTC, trying to understand the tender supplies and also to understand the government thought process about policies, how it changes, how it works, various commodities. And then came this opportunity to start the minerals trading business for Tata International. That was in 2011.
Right.
So I joined them in 2011.
That's about 10 years now.
Yeah, it's a 10-year stint. It's been a great journey, actually. So started from scratch that business, and we grew the business year on year. And as I leave the company recently, like we're doing now 10 million tons of trade with a turnover in excess of $1 billion. So it's been a great journey building it up, not just India, but also in Vietnam, China. So we were actually awarded the Commodity House of the Year in 2018. So it was a great journey. And
wonderful. Wonderful.
And
so
now
give
I
us
am
a
back
little
on this new one. So
yeah,
so
all the best for the new journey, new career opportunities, new businesses. So give us a little background about this coal business. I mean, which are the major producing nations, which are the major exporters, importers in the world, what are the different grades and end users, what are the supply and demand scenarios in this trade?
Yeah, before I answer that, your point about Koile ki dalali mein, I just wanted to touch on that. So Koile ki dalali mein
हाथ
हाथ
काला
तो काला नहीं हुआ है, but
हाँ,
बाल सफेद जरूर हुए
बाल
हैं.
बाल सफेद जरूर हुए. That's a good one.
So with that, I think coming to your question on the industry as a whole and how it is. So coal, as you know, is a very traditional fuel, right? So it's been
Sure.
there for ages. And so if you look at the major producers in the world, so China would be number one. It produces close to 3.5 billion tons of coal, followed very far by India. It's like 0.7 billion. So it's almost 1/5 of what China produces, but India is the number two. And then it is US, which should be around close to 600 million tons. And Indonesia and Australia both are similar, around 500 million tons each. Those would be the top producers worldwide.
South Africa, lower down?
South Africa is lower. South Africa produces around 300 million tons of coal. Russia produces also similar to South Africa, around 300 million tons. Colombia, a small country, but it produces around 80 million tons of coal that way. So those would be your top producing countries. So altogether, you can say the coal consumption worldwide would be close to 8.5 billion tons. So 8.5 billion tons of total consumption. But if you look at the seaborne trade, which we are involved in, right? So a lot of domestic consumption which happens, we're not involved in that. So out of the 8.5 billion ton totally consumed, seaborne trade would be close to 1.2, 1.3 billion tons. That's where the play is, right? So that's where the trading companies get involved. So in those that trade basket, again, if you look at the exporting countries, who are the exporting countries? China, as I mentioned, is the largest consumer, but doesn't export. Okay,
right.
So your exporting countries are Australia and Indonesia. Indonesia, I think, is now number one, overtaken Australia. Almost 80% of their production they export. So around 400 million tons they export annually. Australia also, almost 75% of their production they also export. So you can say between Indonesia, Australia, it changes a little bit here and there, year on year, but it's around 400 million tons of exports between both of them, each of them rather. And then after that, you would have US who would be doing around 150 million tons. Then you have South Africa, which is doing around 80 million tons. Colombia exports everything that they produce, so they are also 80 million tons of exporter. So those would be your main exporters. You can say Indonesia, Australia, Colombia, US, Russia. So those are the main exporters of coal. Then you come to importers. So importers, China is the largest importer. It imports 350 million tons of coal, which is 10% of their consumption, right? I told you they consume around 3.5 billion tons. So only 10% of what they consume, they import. The rest is all their domestic production. Then the number two currently is Japan. India used to be number two, but India has reduced a little bit on the import side. So Japan, you can say, is close to 200 million tons of coal. Third would be India, which is around 180 million tons of imports, followed by Korea, Taiwan. So you can say it's an Asian story on imports. So Asia would be accounting for almost 80% of the total imports worldwide. That way, it follows basically the GDP patterns as well, right? So the GDP growth kind of closely mirrors the energy production and in turn the coal consumption, right? So it's kind of matches each other. So that's how I would say the trade flows are. Now coming to the end use industry that you said that where gets consumed, right? So the coal typically is two kinds. So broadly it's classified. One is the energy coal, which is mainly used for energy production. Second is the coking coal, which goes for steel making.
Steel making.
Yeah. So
thermal coal will be the energy, right?
Correct. So thermal coal is specifically the boiler kind of coal, but energy coal is a little broader name, which also includes cement and DRI and other industries. So energy coal goes into three main industries. One is the power generation, which you call the thermal coal. And the second is the cement industry, where it is used again for more as a chemical rather than as a energy component, but it's also used for heating the boilers inside the cement plants as well. But cement production, if you say, it is used as a chemical to reduce the calcium carbonate, right?
Right.
Then it goes a major consumption which goes is called the DRI. So it's a India, they call it the sponge industry. So sponge industry is a direct reduced iron, which is basically they reduce the iron ore to iron, and then that is used for making steel at the later stage. So DRI or a sponge industry consumes a lot of coal in specific countries like India. So you can say these are the three main segments: power, cement, and steel in a way.
Steel.
And then coking coal goes only for steel making. So it goes into making met coke, metallurgical coke. Metallurgical coke then reacts with iron ore in the blast furnace and produces your iron and then steel. So so that coking coal segment is totally flows into the steel industry. So you can say between the energy coal and the coking coal is 80-20 kind of split in the total traded volumes. So out of 1.2 million, 1.2 billion, 1 billion would be energy coal and 200 million would be the coking coal segment.
Coking. Okay. So why have the coal prices like more than doubled, if I'm not wrong, since May 2021?
Good question. Actually, so everybody is talking about it, right? So it's a hot topic. I mean, just to look back a little bit, actually, prices of most of the commodities have increased post-COVID, right? It's not post yet, but I think post the peak time of COVID, I think the commodity prices have just gone berserk, right? So if you look at copper, look at aluminum, you look at oil, everything has almost doubled, if not more. And so coal has been a similar story, though I think the last 6 months has been little overheating, I would say, more than people were expecting. But that is primarily, you can say, because of the, I would say, 3 or 4 main reasons. One which comes to mind is the supply constraint, which has kind of affected the industry in the last 6 months. Supply constraint has come primarily from weather conditions in Indonesia and Australia. Both of them have suffered from high rainfalls, and because of that, the hauling and the mining has been impacted, reducing the availability on that side. Colombia has taken some production cuts in terms of shutting down of a mine. I mean, South Africa, if you look at, they had a very severe pandemic. They had a very severe pandemic in the last 6 months. In fact, if you've seen some of the news clippings in between, there was a time when they had massive unrest, civilian unrest as well, which they looted. People were on the streets looting, stuff like that, which kind of the railroads, etc., was shut for some time. So that impacted the availability of South African coal. So there has been a supply disruption story in the last 6 months. Second part of the second reason, I would say, has been the demand expansion, which has been there for China particularly. They have been doing very well economically, and in turn, the power requirement, also the coal going into the smelting, etc., the requirement has really gone up tremendously over the last 6 months. So that is one reason. Even Europe and US have also done quite well economically over the last 6 months. So that also has put pressure on the prices in terms of demand expansion. And the third thing which has also helped prices is the alternate to coal, right? So in a fuel basket, if you look at the major alternative to coal is gas.
Right.
And the
those
gas
prices have gone up.
Yeah, gas prices have doubled. So if you look at the Henry Hub index, the gas prices have gone from 2.7 to almost 5.9, which is more than doubled actually. So so the alternate to coal is also been expensive. So that has helped the coal to uh, increase price as well, right? So it's kind of, if you look at a free flowing market, if the alternate product is rising in price, you also benefit from that. So all in all, I think it's a supply contraction, demand expansion, alternate fuel prices going up. So all that has resulted in a major rally on coal. And we are now sitting on historic highs on all kind of coals.
Right. So what about freight increases? How much have they contributed to the, like, for example, C&F prices to Indian ports and, for the Indian
absolutely.
importer?
Yeah, it has added to the overall cost, right? One has been the FOB price rises. On top of that, the freights have also rallied massively. So overall impact on CFR has been quite high. It's a double whammy actually. So so that has made power production very difficult, particularly on fixed power contracts.
Right.
The power plants which had a PPA,
Right.
those power plants have either taken a shutdown or taken a reduction. They're sitting on very low stocks. So currently, I think it's a calamity which is about to hit the industry. We are seeing repercussions already in parts, and I think this price increases are not helping. And those power purchase agreements have to be really looked at, because if government insists on those power purchase agreements, obviously uh, it's not going to commercially help the power plants to run. So that's where we stand as of now.
So help me understand this. So international prices itself have, more than doubled, right? And freight rates have gone through the roof. So if you look at the CFR India prices from May or from January, do you have some numbers somewhere, or am I suddenly putting you in a spot and you don't have the numbers? How much has that increase been?
It depends on the origin. So just to give you a sense of Indonesian coal, which goes for Indian power plants,
right?
There is a very popular coal called 4,200 GAR, gross calorific value coal.
Correct.
Which is very popular coal in India for most of the power plants. So if you look at those, that coal, it used to be FOB wise around $50 six months back, and with a freight of, you can say, $10, so $60 CFR. So currently that coal FOB is $100, and freight would be $25 into India. So you're talking about from $60 to $125.
Right.
So
more than double.
Those are absolutely new numbers, new territory, where Indonesian coals have not gone before. So 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 obviously the end users are grappling with it. One is they were also banking a lot on Coal India rise in production, right? Coal India has been talking up that, okay, India doesn't have to import anymore. We will be self-sufficient. We'll be producing enough for everybody to be taken care of. So, and they have not really lived up to that comment, right? So it's not enough local production rise, and on top of that, import prices have gone for a 6. Altogether, the plants are in a fix. They don't have the domestic coal which they're banking on that will come through, and now they have this $125 CFR prices to deal with, which doesn't make sense for their power plant agreements, right? Power purchase agreements to work. So large companies have taken shutdowns. So very precarious situation actually in India.
Right. So you briefly touched upon the, China-Australia relations and, the strains there and having major repercussions on coal trade flows, right? So can you elaborate on this? Shouldn't that have increased supply in the marketplace, and but still we have had more than doubling?
No, that's a very interesting question because it used to help definitely the availability.
Hmm.
As you know, this almost a year, more than a year, this has happened. There is no official declaration by China that they won't be buying Australian coal, but there is a implicit clarity among the importers in China that if you get the Australian coal vessel coming in, it will stand for long periods of time for custom clearances. So that in a way you can say non-tariff
Right.
barrier that we talk about, right? So that's what
Yes.
has been put in place. And
Right.
interestingly, it's only for coal, whereas they keep buying a lot of iron ore from Australia. Uh, so this was helping India because a lot of excess Australian coal, which was mainly going to China, got diverted into India. So India benefited during that time. Uh, but currently, with these high prices going, like those coals are more than 120 FOB now, right? So it's not helping India either right now. So right now, all prices are high. So those excess coals, which are not ideal for Indian power plants, but they are using it when the prices are low and as a substitute. But currently, the price is being so high that substitution is also not possible. Uh,
Right.
but yeah, but you are right that currently, if you look at the uh, entire coal price basket, Australian coal probably is the best price at this point in time
Okay.
because of this China situation. That
Right.
is definitely. Uh, but
Right.
China is also paying a high price for this posture. So there, China is paying a much higher price for non-Australian origin coals because they have taken this stance. Particularly if you look at a coking coal, which is an oligopoly. It's practically controlled by very few producers. So they're barring Australia. If you look at, there are very few options. Canada has a large producer. Russia has few producers. US has few producers, but that's it. So, and those producers are currently laughing their way to the bank because they are able to sell to China at $100 premium as compared to what they would get for India. And China is willing to pay those premiums because there is no choice. So China is paying a huge cost for this stance which they have taken. But yeah, it's in the overall scheme of things, probably it works out, right?
So there's another, recent news that came out, right? In September, Bloomberg reported that, Indian companies picked up 2 million tons of discharged, Australian thermal coal from
Yeah.
Chinese ports, right? At about $12 to $15 a ton discount. So, well, which is in line with like what you were talking about previously, and then so they don't want that Australian origin products, and so they may probably let go because of the non-tariff unstated barriers. But then
Yeah.
from a Indian buyer's perspective, for them, will there not be deteriorations in quality if it was lying in the port for a while? What can you tell us about all these such purchases in general, from price perspective, quality perspective, and so on? It's opportunistic, but is it really
No,
good stuff?
you know more about coal than you said initially. So obviously you know
No.
about the quality of coal deteriorating while it getting stored. So
Yeah, no,
so
I was also a trader, right? So
so you are right about particularly the coking coal. Coking coal deteriorates quite fast. It's got certain properties. The caking properties of a coking coal kind of deteriorates very fast when it stored openly,
right.
as compared to energy coal.
Okay.
Energy coal also deteriorates, but it takes
Hmm.
little longer as compared to the coking coal. So yeah, there has been some cases where the discharge port qualities has been hugely different when it is arrived at India as compared to what was there in China, what was reported to be there in China.
Hmm.
There has been deviations, but people have so much benefit, right? So they have a $12 to $15 discount. So they probably built in some amount of deviation for quality in those prices when they're taking those decisions. So 12 to 15 is you're talking about the energy coal side. If you look at coking coal, the discounts have been almost $50 to $60. at which it has come to India. So they're okay, even if there's little deviation, a little drop in the quality, they can still live with it given the price benefits that they're getting. And
Right.
but also some of those trades may come under pressure currently because China is also talking about maybe allowing some of those coals in, given that they're heading towards a blackout and they have very little coal on some of the power plants. So they may close their eyes a little bit and allow some of the coal to come in, saying that, okay, we don't know, you just move it in, kind of thing, right? So, so,
Yeah, yeah.
so that may
You didn't
happen
say,
as
we
well.
didn't
So,
hear, those kinds of
yeah,
things.
exactly. So some of those deals may come under default or force majeure if that happens, because if China decides to take those in, some of those committed deals may come under pressure or may not happen for India as well.
Right, right. So with the, you mentioned the rising price of commodities in general, right? And coal in particular. So we also hear about blackouts in China, and you also referred to the problems in India along those lines of power shortage. How do you think this will pan out in the coming days?
It's a very hard question to answer. I think it's definitely sitting on an inflection point at this point in time, right? So it's sitting where either the government doesn't do anything. In that case, the blackouts will continue. The power plants will not be able to operate, and we'll have situation where the industries will have not have enough power to run. The other option is government has to intervene. As I was touching on that, PPAs, the power purchase agreements, has to be relooked at. Those prices needs to be revised, or the formula has to be changed to take into account the high prices prevailing currently to make it viable for the power plants to operate. So I think the government intervention would be very important at this stage, I think, which I, particularly in Indian case, I don't see government uh, taking any steps yet. Whereas in case of China, post their Communist Party convention, which happened, the 100th year convention, which happened in July, government has been very vocal on that front. So they have been talking about increasing the domestic coal rapidly to take care of these high rising prices and make more domestic coal available for the industry. But it's easier said than done, because mainly because the the investments in some of these coal mines have been lacking for some time, and to ramp it up without any safety incidents and to make sure that it delivers the required output will take some time. Second is it's heading towards a winter. The most of the mines are in the northern China, where it's a harsh winter, and it's not be easy to ramp it up during this time of winter. So given all that, I think China would be taking some steps definitely to cool it down, which may happen post Chinese New Year. That's what currently people think.
Wow,
But
that's quite some
some,
time, Sabi.
yeah, because the winter is that long, right? So there's little they can do during this time. Uh, all they can do is allow the power purchase agreements to be relooked at in terms of prices, and so that the producers keep buying even if the prices are high, right? So that's what I think the other solution at this point in time. I think Indian
So
government
you
must be
just
thinking in those lines as well, though they have not come up with any official statements yet in this regard. But I think they must be also thinking in this lines.
right. Yeah, after the Chinese party, the 100th year conference, you mentioned that they were, willing to relook at increasing coal consumption. So that triggers a question in my mind. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, he called for an end to deadly addiction to coal, right? And we have been reading about electricity from renewables becoming more competitive, and definitely, we hear that news not only from other countries, but China and India. There have been a lot of investments that have gone in, and they have been talking about how those are really competitive sources of energy. So why is there so much demand for thermal coal then?
See, I think you need to look at the percentage contribution of each, right? So if you look at the data from 1971 to 2021, in a 50-year pan of time, thermal coal was that time 40% of your energy mix. It is still 35% of your energy mix. So it's not really, it has changed drastically. Mainly because the other ones have reduced. Some of like nuclear used to be a major part, which has reduced. Hydro has reduced over time. So those areas have been covered by the renewables, which you mentioned. The solar has come in, the wind has come in. Solar and wind has done very well in the last 5-6 years. And they account for almost 10% of the energy mix now, which is a very good thing going forward. But the dependency on coal is still 35%, and which is quite large. And as I mentioned, the other alternative, which is gas, has also been equally expensive this year. Given that there is not much else the power plants can do, because the renewables have not reached that stage where they can completely substitute coal with that. Hydro is not enough, nuclear is not enough. Gas is not a viable commercial alternative at this point in time. So that's not really helping the coal story. So coal will be phased out over a period of time. I don't see it really going away so soon, and it's uh, been proved by this rising prices on coal, which shows that how much dependent we are still on coal, right? So that
Right. So in last couple of years or a couple of years back, especially during the Trump era, we often heard this word clean coal, right? But carbon capture and sequestration is a known technology which has been there, and
yeah.
there have been significant developments for quite some time. So really, is clean coal really possible, or was that all greenwashing in a talk in that country? So what are the climate related and other challenges that will impact this industry?
There are a few good things happening on the coal side, right? So one is what they call the HELE, which is high efficiency, low emission technology, which is
Okay.
basically the boilers which convert the coal into steam. They have been improving over time. So if you look at Japan, most of the boilers are ultra supercritical boilers. So that means that they can produce that much of steam consuming much less coal. So that the efficiency is going up. So the power production, which used to consume a certain amount of coal, is requiring much less coal now using this technology on the boiler side things. And those boilers are also very low on the emission, because one is they use less coal, plus they have a way to capture the CO2 and bring it back into the circulation and doesn't emit almost. I mean, Japan claims that the emission from the power plants is even lower than emission from the cars on the streets. So
Wow.
it's that good. And that's why Japan is pursuing on coal-fired power plants until now. And we know very well Japan is very finicky about the environment and how fussy they are as a country. So there's a lot of good things happening in the HELE space. Whereas on the carbon capture, it's an expensive process, right? So carbon can be captured pre firing into the boiler. It can be captured post firing into the boiler. But
Different
those
stages, right? And
at
then it
different
has to be
stages,
captured.
it can be fully captured. It can be put in the ground. It may not be released to the atmosphere. Those come at a cost. Definitely, it is there, but those come at very high costs. If you say that, okay, we pay so much subsidy to the other industries like renewables, why can't we put that subsidy into the carbon capture of coal? I think that's a valid question to ask. And unfortunately, there is not much fund going into that area because of coal is attracting much less investments or funding at this stage. But if I think more innovation is put into it, I think it's not a greenwash. I think it's a potential there to look at it, because as I mentioned, whether we like it or not, 35% dependence on coal is there, and slowly it can. My estimated at least 15 years before we can really bring it down to any single digit levels. So, on coal.
Okay. So in 15 years or so, we could bring it down to single digit levels. Yeah. That's an interesting, thought. reasonably optimistic given the circumstances, but then we're
Yeah.
also concerned about the climate changes and the temperature increases and so on and so forth.
Also the storage technology, right? For
Yeah.
renewables, the challenge is the storage, right? Where you store
Yeah.
the electricity. It's a periodicity of the nature of the electricity that they produce. Wind will produce during certain periods.
Right.
Solar will produce only in the day. So we need to have a good storage, which is being worked on. Hopefully it will come soon. And until that happens, it cannot really scale up beyond certain percentages.
Yeah. That's a wonderful insight and thought where we could bring this discussion to an end. Thank you, Sabi. A lot of insights about coal and the coal trade and the current situation, why the prices are so high, and also your outlook on what would be the realistically what are the challenges for the next 6 months and so on, given the nature of the market and climate conditions there in China and so on, as well as your outlook on how long it will probably take for the other renewables and alternative sources of energy to be a substitute for coal. And we take it that like there should be a certain efforts to make coal less polluting, at least in the intermediate time period. But definitely, I think we need to substitute it. But then, as you said, there are multiple other issues to be also taken care of in terms of storage, and hope that the battery technology improves to do that. And so
hydrogen is another interesting area which is holding promise. If that comes through, that could be a much faster escalation. But there also
they've been talking about
scaling up.
green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and so on. So
absolutely.
I'll probably find an expert like you and get to talk about that pretty soon, and that will be interesting too. That's on my list, on my do list.
Thank you. Hope I could answer all your points, and thank you for having me here, Venkat.
Our pleasure to have you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us in yet another episode of Move Conversations. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the Move Conversations YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get notifications of new episodes. Thank you very much. Till I see you in the next episode. Thank you very much. Have a great day.